here. All right, all right. It's on. It's on.
Okay.
So how does the ruling change the political scene? Is it any more of a danger to our democracy, quote unquote, than the current system?
Oh, yeah. Look, I mean, just take this little case that was mentioned briefly in some of the newspapers this morning, where there's right now a court trial, or at least a case being brought in Michigan against a grocery company that spent something like $76,000 in a local election I think it was a zoning board. That case is evidently now going to have to be either dropped or completely redone. And I mean, just think about this: if you allow corporations to go in and say spend $100,000 or $200,000 in a local election in towns in all across America, that's just an amazing change in the boundary. I mean, it's really scary. It's not obvious to me what you do about that. I mean, it's the local and state side of this that is perhaps craziest of all. I mean, I'm not saying that the national federal side of it is not scary. It is. But just think about allowing some gorilla to do whatever it wants in your little town in the Midwest. I grew up in the Midwest. This is insane. This is really crazy. What you fundamentally have here is that sort of Mussolini-style corporatism is coming to the United States with the face of libertarianism. I mean, this is really nuts.
But the question is, because I know in your investment theory you talk about how corporations have ways to contributing to the political process in many different ways, through law firms, through the media. Sure. You're saying that they still have some constraints as compared to this new ruling?
Absolutely. I mean, you can effectively give unlimited sums whenever you want as independent expenditures. And I mean, that was not the old story. I mean, you could down even after in the recent change in the law, you couldn't even you couldn't name a candidate, for example, when you that close to an election. Started spending cash like that. Yeah, sure. I mean, that. Anytime you allow a gorilla to do anything it wants, instead of like go take 10 steps down, 3 steps to the right, and turn around to get what it wants, that's a much scarier prospect. Now, this is a really amazing development. Yeah, I mean, I think the ramifications of this will be huge. It also means that an awful lot of senators and representatives, you're going to move to a kind of nuclear war strategy for elections. That is to say, you'd just be terrified of getting some giant opposed to you who can just come in and fill the air with stuff. And a particularly scary side of this is going to be with where in states where judges are elected. I mean, there's not much doubt that, in fact, there's no doubt at all, we got perfectly reasonable numbers, that the amount of corporate money indirectly, mostly, in judicial elections has gone way up. This is going to be crazy. But even in states where you just vote, yes or no to keep a guy, if you can blacken people's reputation by essentially blotting out the sky with ads, that's really something.
So what do you think about the argument that this is about free speech, the First Amendment?
First of all, no human lost their rights to free speech. The head of any company or anybody there can get up and talk about what they want. Corporations are not natural entities. I'm sorry to just sort of take a refuge back in the Constitution, but just imagine, telling Thomas Jefferson or somebody that corporations are just like people. I mean, back then the big dispute, I think it was even McCulloch versus Maryland, question of the legal status of the Bank of the United States, which was a mixed corporation, public-private, as they would say today, public-private partnership. The question of whether it could exist at all was seriously debated. Now, corporations don't traditionally have the same rights as people, for the excellent reasons they're really social creatures. I mean, these are humans that sort of create and endow this kind of association with some kind of special rights. That's crazy. And I mean, my reaction to this after I heard, oh, we're going to treat them exactly like people. Maybe we should just allow corporations to get married. Do we allow them to raise children too? I mean, how crazy is this?
But to what extent is this decision sort of tied to the granting to corporations of personhood? Because under the law, at least in some respects, they're like a legal person, right?
Well, yeah, it's been a long debate ever since. I mean, the evidence that, like, the 14th Amendment, even at the time it was drafted after the Civil War, was twisted by railroad and bank attorneys at the time to leave that question somewhat open for later interpretation is, I think, pretty compelling. And there's no doubt at all that 15 or 20 years afterward, the Supreme Court certainly did begin, holding that. Ever since then, that business about corporations as persons has been sort of an opening wedge for a lot of junk. But what's shocking about this is that in the end, even very conservative Supreme Court judges from the early 20th century did not see a problem with some restrictions on corporations. And suddenly the Supreme Court says that was all wrong. I mean, and then these guys talk about judicial activism. I mean, really.
Right.
The truth of the matter here is, I have to tell you, here the court seems to be just in openly partisan mode, pretty much acting the way they did at the time they rushed to give the 2000 election to George Bush. I mean, there's been a little turnover on that court, but not much. It's fundamentally the same gang. I mean, this looks like an effort to just write in sort of far-right republicanism into the Constitution in a new and shocking way.
But, it seems to me that generally the Democrats are considered to be more subtle in sort of, in everything, in foreign policy as well as in...
It's usually awkward when you have a mass constituency.
Right. So like, doesn't this decision harm parts of the business community, because it sort of makes it too obvious that now corporations are in control, whereas before it was less clear?
I do think that there is some long-run problem here. And I noticed that some business execs have already sent a letter saying, do something about this problem. I think the open corruption of the system, sort of openly visible, is going to turn very rapidly into a real problem. Yeah, I mean, this stinks. Everybody knows it stinks, and so I do think that there is something of a problem brewing here.
Yeah, some people have predicted some changes, such as says, quote, it reduces the power of incumbency. Currently, sitting members of Congress have a huge advantage over challengers, both in terms of raising money and in terms of getting their faces on television. This ruling makes it easier for newcomers to shake things up.
It does, I think, create the possibility for more. Yeah, I think that's right. It also generally tends to narrow the role of political parties, because the decision did leave standing the sort of rules that prohibit you from going directly to a political party, or rather to a candidate, and giving them the money. You have to spend it independently. I mean, it's got to look independent. Now, why the justices could think that's such a big deal? It's like they seem to think if you hand them the money, there's some special bond. If you just go out and spend a fortune for them, they seem to think somehow candidates don't know that. I will tell you, they do know that, and they know it real fast. And, I mean, this is crazy. We might want to talk for a few minutes about what could be done about this.